Start counting.
5, 6, 7.
In 4, damn it! Look at me!
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
Now, was I rushing or was I dragging?
The wildest thing I've ever seen in front of a whole band. Like, could you imagine this today? Like, this dude would be on the news. Like, it's the wildest thing I've ever seen. Wildest thing I've ever seen. Wildest thing I've ever seen.
Otis Brown III didn't just grow up with music, he was shaped by it. With a father who drummed for James Brown and Al Green, and a mother who was a classically trained pianist and choir director, Otis Brown was raised in a home where rhythm, soul, and musicality were baked into his DNA. In this episode, we dive deep into Otis's journey, from church gigs and school band practice to Donald Byrd's midnight office hours and playing with icons like Esperanza Spalding and Robert Glasper. We also get into Whiplash, the film, and how it portrays the pressure, perfectionism, and obsession lurking in the dark side of music education. Otis reflects on whether greatness is truly forged through the breaking down of the artist, or if the artist succeeds in spite of the mentor's abuse, not because of it. Otis also breaks down his acclaimed debut album, The Thought of You, what it means to lead a band, and how he channeled deep emotional expression through the drums, a rhythmic instrument not always seen as melodic. Then there's Kendrick Lamar, an artist that Otis sees as a master of synthesis. We explore how Kendrick blends the language of jazz with the ethos of hip-hop, and how artists like Kamasi Washington and Robert Glasper helped shape To Pimp a Butterfly into a groundbreaking sound, bridging jazz roots with live performance energy. This episode is about craft, control, freedom, and the stories that rhythm can tell, even when there are no words. Let's get into it. Otis Brown, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it, man.
Oh, thanks. I'm honored to be here. Appreciate you having me.
So before we even get into music, I was going through some of your past interviews, and I saw that both of your sons play baseball.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm an extremely washed up college baseball player.
Wow.
Those days are very far behind me. And I realized I never really talked to my dad about his perspective raising a son that plays baseball in high school, college, whatever level they get to. What is it like being a father to two sons who went through that baseball world, that baseball journey?
Oh man, it was, it becomes another job, especially in this day and age when you get into travel baseball and all of the things, but it's a joy. I played in high school and music kind of took over, but I love baseball. So it's like, they kind of, rejuvenated my love for the game, just seeing them love it and grow into it when they were young. There are some benefits for me as a musician because like when I'm not on tour, when I'm home, so I can go hit fungos and ground balls and play catch with them and go to the cages all the time. We had a cage in our backyard when they were young. So music afforded me, uh, time that, regular dads with a 9 to 5 wouldn't have had with their kid, but of course I was gone a lot too, but also, there's a discipline thing, like learning how to be a musician that I was able to translate to them in terms of, working hard and separating yourself and, like baseball is about repetitions, getting reps, they say, so being a musician is spending 8 hours a day, sometimes in the practice room by yourself. So I was able to kind of translate that to what they wanted to do. And they kind of, bought in and accepted it. And, they both play college baseball now. One's a D1, one's at a D2. So,
wow.
yeah, like there's such a small percentage of kids, as in general, play college baseball at any level from, I think 7% from junior college or NAIA to Division I. So for both of them to be playing college baseball and doing something they love is really nice. So
Yeah, the repetition thing you mentioned, I think that's the number one lesson my dad drilled into me when he coached me for some of my earlier years on in baseball, and then eventually went to high school and college. But he would always tell me to not expect anything that doesn't come from your repetition. So you're not just gonna magically throw 90 miles an hour if you haven't done repetitions building up to 88, 90, 92. Same thing with hitting. although that didn't really apply to me because I couldn't hit for shit. So I put down the bat in like 10th grade. My high school coach was like, "Yeah, if you want any chance of playing in college,
Pitch.
you should just don't touch a bat again. Just leave the bats over there. Here's the ball. Just you're right on the cusp anyway. Just
Yeah.
throw and see
Yeah.
how that goes." But the repetition thing for sure, and carrying that over into creative things like podcasting and writing, just getting through the repetitions, no matter what the outcome is, just making the time to sit down
Yeah, I
and
think
do it.
you learn a lot of things through sports that are translatable to applicable to anything you do. You know what I mean? My son's like to this day we have a gym in our garage. My son come home from school and like before he lifts, I'll hear the ball bounce. They both play middle infield, so I hear him like throwing the ball, taking grounders off of the wall, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this just becomes a way of life, and I think you can apply that same mental toughness or the acumen you get from it into other things in life that I think hopefully it'll carry them far. We also the kid there's a kid on the Yankees called named Anthony Volpe. He lives like 5 minutes from us, so really good
Mhm.
friend of ours. I've known him since he was like 12, and he's a shortstop on the Yankees now. But seeing him through all the levels he went through, and his dad Mike and I are really good friends, so we would both go work out together and hit ground balls to the kids and, throw BP to them. So I think it was great for them having that, him and as an example, seeing what you can do, what the possibilities were and the
Oh
dedication
yeah.
it takes. So yeah, it's been great. We get to go to, we follow him. We went to all the minor league levels. We go to Yankees games, and go to batting practice and stuff. So, yeah, it's been great. It's a lot of work and a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Like tournaments and flying and staying in hotels and driving 2 hours and 4 hours.
Yeah.
But it paid off. My goal was scholarship money, and if they do anything past that, which I think they both have a chance to, then if they do anything past college, great. But my goal was to get some college paid for it. It worked out great for for both of
Yeah,
them. So
yeah, the scholarship definitely helps.
yeah.
I gotta ask my dad, looking back on it, I'm like, "Were you being super altruistic, spending all that time and money helping me play baseball when I was younger, or were you secretly, like, hoping it was an investment, being like,
Oh, that was my
shit,
whole
I don't wanna
goal.
pay for college
I'm
yet."
like paying all of this money for travel. I wish I could put a number on it, but I paid a lot
Yeah,
for lessons and
yeah,
everything.
yeah, yeah.
But
You're like, "I'm hoping
my
I get a
goal was
return on
always like,
this."
hey, let's get in college and get this college paid for.
Yeah,
And you get drafted or whatever after that, that's amazing, beautiful. And you both have the ability to do it. Like you're both talented enough, to do it. We have people every year since they've been playing that we know that they train with that have gotten drafted. A bunch of them made it to the major league. So I'm just like, hey, but let's get college paid for and go there and perform well and do good. And they're doing really well. So I'm beyond proud,
yeah.
you know.
And having the guy from the Yankees and other players so close by, I'm sure the proximity to a player at that level definitely helps. Like I'm sure, I know you grew up in a house of music
Hmm.
educators, musicians. You probably had people of all different expertises, different instruments being around the house, listening to them. I'm sure that also translated to you as a musician, just being around those people and having it rub off,
Yeah,
your
I think
parents included.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things for whatever you want to do is exposure, and then that exposure gets into representation too. We're seeing people that look like you do the thing, you know what I mean? But like the exposure to a high level, you know what I mean? Which I think one of the things about jazz is like amazing is that like it's such a mentorship based medium, like, and then for a long time, we're starting to lose a lot of them now, but like to be able to go see Herbie Hancock play, to be able to go see, these icons of our music play and see how they do it and how they maintain that level. And this is what it sounds like at this level. Baseball is like, oh, this is how a Yankee shortstop feels a ground ball. I can emulate
Yeah.
that. This is how his swing is. We went to go to the same hitting instructor. All of those things. Like just the exposure to it makes a huge difference. Like you don't know what you don't know. So like just seeing it and like for example with Anthony, he would go to these USA baseball teams and come back and oh they showed me this, and like my youngest boy was like he and my older boy the same age, but my younger boy was way advanced because he's learning this stuff from this kid that's playing at these high level
Yeah.
tournaments and already implementing it. So by the time he got to high school, it was a game changer. So I think the exposure makes a big difference, and that's another one of those things that's translatable to music, as well.
Yeah, is it also I feel like the exposure to high level mentors, whatever the topic of expertise is, I feel like there's the downloading all of the information, but there's also the experts there to tell you like this, like, don't worry about this shit. Like, you can delete a lot of this. So it's not only taking on the gigantic pieces of information, but it's also them helping you parse out what you don't really need to pay attention to. That might be a traditional coaching or teaching thing. And you have someone there that could be like, yeah, that's bullshit. Like, you don't actually have to do that.
Yeah, there's definitely a filtering that happens. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? An example, like, it was for when I was at the new school. When I was in college, like, there was a ton of stuff you learn, and but then you get in the real world, and it's a lot of it is not practical. Like, it's just like, hey, like, this, you know what? You don't really need to do that. That doesn't make sense to focus on anymore. Focus on these things, and this will get you, to where you're trying to go. So there's a lot of filtering that happens, like, just, but yeah, it goes back to the exposure thing. It's just like, hey, you know what? I know you've been taught to do this, but you don't really have to focus on this. Let's do this in the real world. This is what we do.
Yeah.
This is at people at my level. This is what we do, and that's that.
Is there something specifically at the new school you mentioned
hmm
in New York City, and you went back, this was like 97, I
Yeah,
think you were there.
97. I was there like
I
01,
is
97,
there
01, yeah.
is there something specifically you could remember when you mentioned the filtering, like you were maybe hyper focused on an area where you didn't need to be, and then someone came along and said like, "Listen, you don't have to worry about that. Just, like, do this." Is there a specific
Um,
example that comes to mind?
Not really playing examples. Like, there were things, we used to, like, you take ear training courses, and like, oh, you got to learn, when McCoy Tyner comped on this solo in his left hand when he played with his right. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But it's like, do you really, like, why not? Why can't you just take the solo in totality and how it feels and what he, you know what I mean? But like, there
Yeah.
was like a lot of things that were like, and I get it. It's necessary to some extent. I'm sure, but there's like the scientific part versus like the esoteric or the other stuff. You know what I mean? And some of that scientific stuff is like, hey, you don't really need to focus on that in the real world, or like force that to happen in real world applications. It
Yeah.
should come naturally. If it does, like, as a drummer, we learned all these polyrhythms and learn how to play them. It's like, hey, and then you could go at every gig like, oh, I'm gonna play this cool part. It's like, no, you don't really have to try and force that in. If it comes and other band members and the things around you that are happening kind of bring those out, great, but don't try and implement those things that you scientifically learned
Yeah.
and force them into, whatever you're playing. So there was a lot of, like, deprogramming like that
Yeah.
that had to happen in real world, playing on
Like
just playing on
like not necessarily taking your practice session into the show that night or
completely.
a jam session, just, trying to be more in the moment and
Completely, and
not
that's
necessarily.
that's something I try to teach too, but it's
Yeah.
it's hard for young musicians to get that at times. It was hard for me too, but yeah, it's just like some of that you just have to leave where it is, and hopefully it's inside you and internalize, and then if the opportunity presents itself for it to come out, then great, but you don't want to force it to be a thing, or force it on people. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like leave what you practice there, and then you know.
Yeah. It's I mean, I have a total layman's perspective on this and just as a listener to different types of music,
Mhm.
but is that what you're talking about? Is that like the difference between musical brilliance versus technical brilliance, like the difference between playing a good song and then playing with good technique. Like there's something that people play with that just feels more soulful or sounds more soulful that isn't necessarily doing everything 100% technically correct all the time. It's like a different thing that they're bringing into it.
Yeah, I think that, some of my favorite musicians aren't the greatest technicians. You know what I mean? Some of
Yeah.
my favorite songs are not made by people that can play, you know, over a lot of chord changes or play super fast around the drums. Some of my favorite drummers can just play a groove, and that groove would be the most moving thing you hear. You know what I mean? But if you
Yeah.
ask them to play a drum solo, it might not go well. Um, So yeah, I think there's definitely a difference between technique and feeling. And there's a balance. You want to be technically proficient and be able to play anything, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean you have to put everything you've learned into music. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you want to have it in your toolkit if you need it, but I shouldn't hear you play and hear everything that you can play. You know what I mean? All the
Yeah.
time. Like I don't want that doesn't move people. Like how do you shape music? How do you make it feel? How do you make people feel? And you don't really have to have technique to do that. Like there's a lot of people, musicians, any instrument that don't have a lot of technique and just, they'll make you cry,
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
times
For
in
sure.
certain weeks for me where I can't play you a solid role, but I'll go do a gig and feel like, wow, that gig was really good. It moved people, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Or I might not have the facility that I might not have practiced as much that week or whatever, you know what I mean? But I still know that I can convey a story through music, and you don't really need a ton of technique to do that, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I don't mean to keep going back to baseball, but
Hmm.
there's just so many allegories from what you're saying
Completely.
between sports and music,
Yeah.
like just from what you're saying where you don't need to play everything all the time. Just it's not necessarily the guys who throw 14 different pitches and display that in one inning that are the guys that are the best pitchers. You might have a guy that just throws a really good two seam and a really good slider, and he throws 6 shutout innings with just that. And he might have 10 other pitches, but he just didn't need to throw
Right.
them that day.
Yep, same goes for hitting, or studying with the hitting person, my boys used to study what they had, like, very technically sound swings, but it didn't leave a lot of room for error. So it's like,
Mm,
hey, the swing is great, like, the mechanics, oh, it looks great on video, blah, 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 but in a game, sometimes you're gonna have to lean over and just tap a ball into right field and get a runner in, you know what I mean? Like, it
yeah,
can't be perfect every time, and that it there was a thing in their head, like, "Oh, if I can't get my best swing off, I can't," and it's like, "No, like, you're at the plate, you gotta do a job, you gotta hit the ball, so sometimes it might look great, you might mechanically be pristine, and then other times it'll look funky, and then you get a double, so it's just like
yeah.
that thing is always
Hunter
there, and there's
Hunter Pence built a career on
oh
that,
my
looking
gosh,
like
like,
shit and hitting
people with the
doubles.
ugliest swings that,
Yeah.
Euclid with his crazy stance
Oh,
and,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
they can produce, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter what it looks like if you get the job done,
Yeah.
and in music, it doesn't matter how fast you can play, what your technique is. If you can't play a song well, or you can't shape music a certain way, you know what I mean? None of that really matters if it doesn't move people, so,
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Going back to your childhood, so you grew up with both your parents being music
Mhm.
educators, musicians themselves, very music-heavy household. How do you think having both parents in music shaped your relationship with music and sound? Like, were there songs on all the time from different influences? Like, what do you kind of remember from your childhood?
Yeah, there was a lot of music in the house, like, and it's so funny, so I don't really have specific memories of music in the house. I do like certain songs or certain times, but then we were going to do a lot of musical things. So my mother played piano and directed a choir, so I was always at church or choir rehearsal with her, and learning harmony parts and learning all, like, and I
Yeah.
sang in the choir some too. And then my dad was already always doing studio sessions or band directing or whatever, so I would go with him to those things, and he would practice at home. I would have, just play his drums at home or, play his drums at church when he would be at church. But I was always around music, you know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it was just a way of life. Like that's just what they did. They met in college as music ed majors in the same program.
yeah.
And yeah, I think both of them, my dad kind of learned, like, got it on his own. He started playing in a town like in South Carolina where like they were just paving the roads in like 1992 or 3, like it was one
Mm,
of those towns. But he got drums, learned how to play and loved it, took some lessons, and that was it. And got really, really good. Went to college for it. And my mom, like her mom made her take piano lessons from my mother was playing classical music and piano and playing in church, from when she was little. She had to
yeah.
take piano lessons. So, um, I know my mother. like they didn't want to force music on me. They weren't like, because I think, of course, like a lot of times with kids, like you force something on them and then they end up resenting it later. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm not going to make
for
my
sure.
kid do this. I kind of wish my mother's main instrument is piano. I wish she would have made me sit down next to her and take piano lessons because I struggled with that in college.
Mm,
But they didn't, they weren't really like, "Hey, you have to do this," you know what I mean? Which was, but they saw that I loved it, and it's like, "Okay, well, if you love it and you wanna do it, this is what it takes to do it." Like, you gotta practice, you gotta take lessons, you gotta, learn how to read music and do all of these things, which was great, and I'm appreciative for. Um, but yeah, it was just music was just a way of life, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, like, always there, playing.
yeah.
My mother had, score books of songs the choir would sing. My dad had his drums. He'd be practicing, getting ready for a gig, and he taught the jazz band at Arts High School in Newark, and like the first performing arts school in the country,
Mm,
and which is funny because my mom's last job was principal of that same high school before she retired later, way down the line. But
yeah.
yeah, I was always around his students, always around, a choir, always at a rehearsal, always, somewhere. So it was just like, I just gravitated towards it, I think.
Did Michael B. Jordan go there? Am
That's where
I
he went.
thinking of
Yeah, so
did he go?
Michael B.
I
Jordan was
like,
there.
I've
My mother was there. Yeah, his mom was like a
okay.
counselor. So his mom was a counselor and really like ran the PTA, and like he was already acting. He would come in early to play, like shoot around, play basketball, and she would let him come in the building. So I've never met Michael, but I'm waiting to because he knows my mom and his mom and my mom are cool. So
Yeah,
my oldest daughter graduated from that high school too. She
cool.
was there when my mother was there.
So you were surrounded by music. You were kinda just, like, bathing in musical soup, but your parents weren't pushing you towards it necessarily. They
Right.
were kinda, like, exposing you to it. Do you remember the first time that you started to think about music as being something that could be more? Like,
Mm.
more than just a thing that you did, like, something that could actually be your life?
Yeah, well, so Be My Life, I mean, it was early on. Like I knew I wanted to do something in music. Like this is what I was gonna do. And I think what I saw that as was like just me being a music teacher, like my parents were. My father performed. He was, playing with a bunch of people and stuff, but I think, he's also like in ROTC in college, so he was in the reserves and Army Reserves and all of that. But I think that whatever happened, like I think I came along earlier than they thought. They were married, but it was just like, hey, let me, lock down some steady money or whatever. And but yeah, pretty early on, she just passed recently. One of my first music teachers, like I realized we were learning songs in elementary school and like
Mm,
just singing it, part, and I was like, "Ooh, I love this. I love, like, how it feels figuring out where my art hearing my part against the other parts and, that kinda thing."
yeah,
Like, it was in there, and then at the same time, I was playing in that school band, playing, like, snare drum, when, we would do concerts and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, so it was really early on, like 4th, 5th grade, and then by middle school, I was in, like, a music magnet program where it was, like,
Like hardcore
a
music.
curriculum
Yeah,
based, you audition and it was like a curriculum based, like they had it was like an arts program where you could do dance, drama, whatever, and I was in music and they gave you lessons. I played in this recorder ensemble, like it was all the things. So, and then in that program, you had to do all the other disciplines. So I had to take ballet, I had to act in some stuff, I had to, you know what I mean? So it was just like I knew that I wanted to be in the arts. I liked acting a lot. I was pretty good at it at the time.
mm,
But music kind of I was just like, this is the thing for me. So
yeah.
I had private lessons then, as part of the program. And yeah, I was playing a lot of saxophone then. I was taking private lessons on alto, um, but still playing drums, at the
Mm.
same time. So
Do you feel a similar level of stage fright with music and acting? Like, I'm
mm,
curious what that's like being on stage and having to say lines, and then being on stage and having to do an alto saxophone improv. Like the difference between what those two feel like.
I don't know, for me, I don't know why, like, I think the musical one was more for me, like, I never had I don't know, I don't have a problem being in front of people and talking and doing that thing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think this is why I interview so well or whatever, like, I just never had a problem speaking in front of people, like from when I was early. I don't know why that is, but I think I got more nervous on the musical part, on the musical side of things than
Yeah.
like, just the act, like when I was acting. I remember we did like a soldier story and I had to play this role of like I forgot who played it in the movie, but yeah, I was good at memorizing lines. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I think like, wow, I should have explored that a little more,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, I think I mean, feel like music seems like it would be more nerve-wracking being on stage, especially if you're gonna be playing not in a full-size band, but maybe you just have a few people,
Mhm.
maybe it's just you, because if you do something where you mess up and you perceive it as a mess up, I feel like music mess ups can be covered up a lot more easily than if you're in a play
Right.
and you say the wrong line and maybe the other actor kind of is like, "What?" Like, they kinda give you a look and, like, the audience goes, "Oh, yeah,
That was
that
yeah,
was a screw
yeah,
up." I feel like you never
yeah.
like, I've been to hundreds of concerts, I don't have a time in my head where I thought, "Oh, wow, like, that was a screw up on stage." It just kind of, like,
And
keeps
it's inevitably
going.
happened. Like it's
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
happened. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the setting. Sometimes you're more exposed in music. I kind of think it's the same. You know what I mean? It depends on the size of the group, what the situation is in the setting. But yeah, it's probably, somewhat equal. Like I'm sure,
Yeah.
you go see Othello and Denzel and from night to night, there's some things they're like, "Oh, did when they get back together with the cast, they're like, "Oh, thank you
Yeah,
for going with me on that." I'm sure it happens and we don't see it in
yeah.
that medium too.
That's yeah, you go 20 times to see Othello, and then Denzel sees you in the front row, and he's just like, "Oh, this guy's just waiting to see if I mess up a
Right.
line." He's coming. He's
Right.
waiting for the moment
I
where
mean,
you go,
there's a
"Yeah,
human element in all of it, you know what I
yeah,
mean? Nobody's perfect, so it's gonna happen.
yeah,
It's inevitable. Like no matter how much you prepare or how much you internalize, like it's human
yeah,
moments are gonna happen. But that's what makes art to me. That's what moves people is that, I wouldn't,
yeah,
want, you know, automatons playing jazz or like I love the, oh, and then the drummer responds like, oh, this didn't go right, and the piano player fills in. Like those moments are magic. So
yeah."
yeah,
So your dad played with some
he
legends,
did. Yeah,
James
right.
Brown, Al Green.
Yeah.
Did he impart you with any stories from that time working up close with those guys? I'm
I
sure
mean,
there's
he
some
told me a
interesting
story
bits.
about like working with James Brown, where he would just like flash, like if you mess up, he would flash like a dollar amount that you were being docked. Like he would turn
Oh,
around and
like
be
he
like,
turned
yeah,
around
he would
during the
turn around
show
and be
and be
like
like,
5, and
"5."
that'd be like $5. Like,
That's
yeah, like
$5 off your
stories like
pay.
that. Um, Nothing really crazy though. He's told me about like being in sessions with like my godfather's Bernard Purdy, so he was kind of
Mm,
working under him for a while and talk about being at scoring sessions and stuff with some people that ended up becoming professors of mine at the new school, but like legendary like Donny Hathaway and just a bunch of things that he was fortunate enough to
yeah,
be around that were pretty amazing.
yeah. That would be so intimidating if you're on stage with James Brown, he's leading a band, and then he stops in the middle of the song to turn around to flash a 5 at you, and there's probably other people in the audience who've been to multiple shows that kind of know
Know
what
what
that
it is,
means,
right, 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 right.
and then so you see people in the audience looking at you like, "Guy fucked up."
Right.
He's getting paid $20 to
But
play a show, and,
you
like,
wouldn't
there goes
hear it,
5.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's not like you would even know,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I guess it to be a band leader, because 'cause you've been both. You've played on other people's songs, but you've also put out your own album back in 2014, The
Mhm.
Thought of You. So you've kind of worn both of those hats, and it seems like if you're the band leader and you're up there and you're kind of like listening to this baby that you've created, you might be more prone to hearing like little screw ups here and there just because you're more hyper focused rather than if you're playing someone else's song, you're kind of just like worried about more of your own part.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for me as a band leader, like, it's not nobody's ever gonna play your music the way you hear it in your head, exactly the
Mm,
way you hear it, you know what I mean? And that I get annoyed with that as a drummer, as a working sideman too. It's just like, "Hey, I'm gonna get close, I'm gonna work to what do you hear here? Okay, cool." But it's not gonna be exactly what you hear in your head, you know what I mean? Like, because
mm,
that unless it's that kinda gig, you know what I mean? But sometimes it's like, that takes away my personality from it, and I'm not saying I have to bring my personality to it, but I'm gonna interpret it in a certain way, you know? And I think, like, as a band leader, especially in jazz, like, you trust that you can convey what you want, but you also leave a lot of room for people to bring their personality to it. And you hopefully that's why you hire people
yeah,
that you know. And hopefully that's why I've been hired, as much as I have with the people I work with is that, they know I'm going to do the job of playing what they want, but also bring something else to it that's like uniquely me. Um, so yeah, I don't, I'm not a band that's like, oh, like of course you write a song, you hear if an eighth note is off, if you hear if like the melody's not exactly right, but it's like, in the grand scheme of things, like does it really matter,
yeah,
in the big picture?
yeah. So to go back to high school, so you were playing the saxophone at this point, and
Hmm.
you're playing a lot of other instruments. You're
Right.
kind of in a full performing arts program.
Mhm.
What was the thing that drew you specifically to the drums?
It was my dad. So in high school, I was play sax in the jazz band and play snare drum in the marching band, so I was like drumline captain and that whole thing. And then, I actually went to the high school where my dad was band director. It wasn't in my district school, but I went there and I could have gone to that arts high performance school. I applied and got in there, but um I wanted to go where my mom was
Mm,
vice principal at that same school and my dad was band director. So it was like all my friends were there because I hadn't been going marching in his band from the 6th grade, like, and I could have gone to Arts High, and sometimes I'm like, maybe I should have, because people from Arts High didn't have a marching band, so some of those kids would leave school, come to be in our marching band because it was the best one in Newark.
mm,
Um, but I went to his school, just to kind of be under him where my parents were. Um, but drums kinda were always there. I went to college initially as a saxophone major at Delaware State, um,
mm,
but drums kinda took over there. That's when I was really taking lessons and focusing and practicing, and it was just like, um, I was still playing drums a bit, and, yeah, my friends had a band, and then, I was just started playing in their little band, and we became like a unit. And I was just like, you know what, I bought a drum set. I had asked my dad to get me a drum set, and he was just like, I'm not buying you a drum set. I just got you this new saxophone, and it
yeah.
was a lot of money. And he's like, you want a drum set, you get it yourself. So I had a refund check from school one semester. I bought a drum
Mm,
set.
I remember those. Occasionally,
Yeah,
they like over pay your
I used to be
scholarship or
waiting for
something.
those,
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I'm getting, like, $1,100 back this semester," like,
yeah. It's
so
like the college version of tax
oh my
refunds.
gosh, yeah, so I was just waiting for it. I took that money, I bought a drum set, and then, like, the school I was at didn't really have a decent drum set, so I would have to take my drums into the practice room, so I would take my stuff in there and just, like, you know, practice
Yeah.
a lot, and then I was like, "Oh," like, I felt like the drums were coming like, the same amount of time, the drums were coming more naturally to me, like, with the
Mm,
same amount of focus and effort and hours spent, I would progress more on the drums than I would on the saxophone. And, it kinda, sax started falling by the wayside, and then I just kinda fully converted to drums, in college.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did the drums feel like less of a job
I was
than the
gonna say the
saxophone?
saxophone always felt like work. Like, it
Yeah.
didn't feel like both of them are work, but the drums didn't feel like work. Like, I could do that all day. I was dating somebody, she would have to come by the practice room to see me, and, like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just
Yeah.
like my friends were going to parties, I kinda stopped going to parties. I was like, "No, I'll go on campus with you, Imma go practice. Y'all come get me after the party," and,
Yeah.
like, it became a thing like that, and I never felt like that with the saxophone. Like, I never
Yeah.
wanted to
You're
just
tricking
go in
your
there. I just
you
never it was always work.
you're tricking your first dates into coming to see you play gigs because 'cause you're like, "Well, I'm
Oh,
not missing this, so I'll just invite
totally.
her to I'll just
Totally.
invite her to a show." She's looking around, being like, "Where is he?" And then she just sees you behind the drums. You're like,
Right.
"I'll see you in an hour."
Completely. It
Getting that
was
work
like
in.
yeah, she would go eat, come back, she would sit there, do homework and my little practice, like,
Yeah.
it was cute. But, yeah,
I
that's
wonder
kinda
what
when
that
it took over in college.
yeah, I wonder what that is, like, the thing inside of people that just hooks onto something that doesn't feel like work.
Right,
Like so
right.
many things feel like you can feel your soul getting sucked by it a little bit when you're doing it. You're like, like I'm doing this because I have to, and maybe because I've done it for a while,
Mm.
but I don't really want to be here that much. And then there are other things where you feel like no matter how much time you do it, it never feels like enough.
Yeah.
I wonder like what the thing is that like latches on to people that makes them feel
Yeah,
like that.
I mean, I honestly think part of it is purpose, you know what I mean? I think there's some things that we're supposed to be doing, you know what I mean? Like Toni Morrison, I don't think she could have not been a writer. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like just the way she write, I have friends that are just like, yeah, Alvin Ailey could not have been a dancer. It was what he was
mm,
put here to do, and those people like that are, I think there's something that grabs you sometimes, and it's like, hey, this feels right because I think it's in there before you even get to it. You know what I
mm.
mean? I know music
Yeah,
was in there for me before I even chose the path. Like it was some kind of way it was in my DNA where it was like, hey, this is something that, but the thing is, a lot of people don't ever get to that. And that's the part where it's like, hey, we get into things sometimes where, or don't even access it. Not even that it has to be your way of life. You know what I mean? But it's like, hey, if you like gardening and, you don't tap into gardening, then you kind of miss out. It's not like you got to be a gardener for your profession. But, there's
yeah,
something that I think there's a bit of purpose there. And I feel that for me wholeheartedly, like there's a, I was meant to do this and meant to kind
yeah.
of, be in this world and in this realm and connect with people the way that music makes you connect with people. Like I feel that was in me before I was even able to access it.
Yeah. No, it is like the universe is waiting for you to
Right.
discover it. It's kinda just, like, there in the background, and then once you lock into it, it's like the day like, your life before, and then
Yeah.
everything after you discovered that thing.
Right. And hopefully that happens sooner than later. Sometimes people don't find it until
Yeah.
50, 60, you know what I mean? But it's just like, prayerfully you find it. And I'm fortunate that it's worked for me and I get to do something that I love that, I would do for free if I had to,
Yeah.
like but because I love it and it just feels like home for me.
So, once you started drumming full time, is this still at Delaware
Yeah.
State, or did
Yeah.
okay, and
Yep.
then you were at Delaware State, and then you came to the new school
Yeah.
in New York
So
City?
Donald Byrd, the legendary trumpet player, Blackbirds and Donald, all these Blue
Mm,
Note records, and he became artist in residence my last 2 years at Del State, and then kind of changed my whole trajectory, like hanging with him and hearing stories. And he would perform concerts and bring New York musicians down. And, like that exposure thing that I talked about, like I hadn't really been exposed to it on that level at that time, like, and at the time, whatever they say, a lot of things are wasted on the youth. Like I knew who he was, but I didn't know the magnitude of who he was until later. And somebody I had access to like every day for a while, but he took a liking to a group of us, and we would hang with him in his office hours and listen to music and hear stories and play with him. And that was game changing for me. Like just knowing like, hey, like you're pretty good, you have some potential. And like I said, I was just gonna be a music educator like my parents. I was in a music education program. I was ready to just like, hey, I'm gonna go teach. Um and then when I finished there, he was like, hey, like what are you gonna do? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, man, you should think about, trying to do this for, I was like, well, how do you even do that? What do you do? How do you even become, I don't even know what that means. Like,
yeah.
how do you become a full-time musician and tour and do studio sessions and stuff? And he
Oh,
suggested,
so you weren't even thinking
oh,
about being a full-time musician
I
at that
think I
point?
was, but
Okay.
to the extent that I knew, you know what I mean? I didn't
Yeah.
know what that, like how you get to do this on tour and be on a stage on
Yeah.
TV, and like I didn't know what that was. I was just playing in little hotel bars and like, making money doing
Yeah.
that. And as a college student, my little hotel bar gig paid great for like 250 or something. Like in the 90s, that was great. So I was like,
Yeah.
hey, I can do this, make some money, and who knows where it goes long term. So
So he
once he told me, he was like, you should try and do this. And then he had taught at the new school and suggested I go to New York, and that was
yeah.
really it. I wasn't really take when I was younger, like, and I think back, I regret it sometimes. Like there was so much jazz going on and right in New York that I wasn't really going to see, you know what I mean? I had a in those years, I had a chance to see a lot of legends before they passed. But my parents weren't really into jazz, you know what I mean? Like my dad played a lot of funk stuff, my mother like gospel and so they loved jazz, but it wasn't like it was like, hey, we're gonna go to the Village Vanguard or go to wherever, when I was growing up. So I didn't start taking advantage of that stuff till I was in Delaware. And then hanging with Donald Byrd, I would drive up
Mm.
to New York, come stay with my family, go to the city, go to jam sessions, go see, you know, whoever I was listening to, Branford Marsalis or whatever, if they were playing in New York. Yeah, I started going to all the free festivals New York used to have in the summer and hearing people play and meeting people and I'm very personable and can talk to anybody, so I would go up and introduce myself and then when he suggested the new school, when I got to New York, I got in with a group of people and that was kind of like,
Mm.
it took off from there. That was the kind of Donald Byrd and then the new school's kind of what built my career.
So Donald Byrd, it sounds like he was the guy that sort of pulled back the curtain on being a full-time musician and was kind of like look in this window, like you could do this if you want, like that could be you. And yes, I mean, sometimes it seems silly until you have someone tell you like, no, like you can do that. Like that's, stand-up comedy or music. Like those are things
Whatever it
people
is.
get paid to do. Like you
Yep.
can do that.
You can do that if
So
that's what you love, like, go try and do like, that's completely he totally pulled back the curtain, like, I and honestly, I didn't really know who he was before I met him, you know what I
mm,
mean? I wasn't hip to who he was and the icon that he was in music, and being around him and getting to know him, like it definitely pulled back the curtain. Like, hey, it's the same thing. Back to baseball. Like my boys, Anthony would have these things like in the summer, in the off season, where some minor leaguers and him, they would come here, get a facility, especially during COVID, and go take ground balls. And my little guy would be fielding balls, like it's like, oh wow, like
yeah.
they're professional baseball players, and I'm fielding the same baseballs they are, making the
Yeah.
same plays. Like, oh, this is accessible for me, but you don't know until you see it. Like
Yeah.
it's really the thing. Like somebody has to pull the curtain back. Like, hey, there's a whole other avenue here for you to do this if it's what you want to do. So
I remember at the facility, the baseball facility that I used to train at in high school, there would be a few guys that went on to the pros, and then they would come back and
right.
they would still train there
Yep.
over the winter, over the summer, whenever the out of baseball season.
Yeah.
Some guys would play in summer leagues, winter leagues, but they would always come back, and there would be times where I'm building up my arm, and I'm a 10th, 11th grade pitcher, and so I'm barely cracking 85 at this
Right.
point. I'm like throwing 83, 85. And then there's a guy who I know throws like 92, 93, 95. Some guys harder than that. Now everyone throws 100, it seems like, on Instagram, but this is like 12, 13 years
Right.
ago. And they'd be throwing a work bullpen, like working on stuff, and I'd be like, "That guy just threw 87. Like that's 3 miles an hour harder than what I'm throwing right."
Right.
Like that's not that far away. And
Right.
yes, he's just working on stuff,
Yeah.
but like it kind of like humanizes the professional process when you see a pitcher that's in double A or the guys who make it to the bigs and they come back and you're like, oh yeah, like they work on stuff. Like
Right.
they're not just throwing
And
100%
you
all the time.
remember where they were. You remember when he could only throw 84, 85. Even
Yeah.
we played on this elite trout called the Arsenal, and there were a bunch of kids that made it to the pros. Mike Trout played there, but way before us.
Mm,
But you saw those kids when they were throwing 85, even when you were a few grades below them, and now they come back and they're doing this. So it's like, oh, they got stronger. They were in the gym. They did this, and now they're here. You know what I mean? And that like
yeah.
that humanization of it, like the exposure, like you see it and like really in practice. And I think that does something mentally. Like you don't, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's something about it, like, oh wow, seeing that that's possible, somebody actually doing it and seeing what their progression, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, well, if I do A, B, C, D through Z, I can have the same type of progression. It might look different for me along the way, but it's achievable, it's
Yeah.
something that I can accomplish. And
Yeah.
I think the same ties to music too. Like for Donald Byrd, for me, it was just like, oh, all these people he's on records with, and they did the same thing. They just got together and played with their friends and, played on gigs and people heard them and recommended them. And that, it's like, oh, okay, the same formula still exists and it can work.
Yeah. Yeah, when you see a professional that's playing around and working on stuff, it makes the art form seem much more accessible rather than when you're listening to the polished product. Because I don't even think I would've yeah, I probably would have tried to play college baseball, but I don't think I would have made such a direct leap in terms of my ambitions to play in college if I didn't see guys ahead of me come back that were playing D1, and I'm like, "Oh, like, you know, I see what they're doing,
Right.
and they're definitely better than me at this point," but I saw the path that they took to, play at UVA or Duke or wherever.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is, I think the exposure is the key, and just like having access, like you said, same thing with my boys. We would be in the facility, kids would come back like, oh, he plays in Virginia, he plays,
Yeah.
now, and they'd be working out in the same place, doing the same drills, working on the same stuff, and you see like, oh, okay, like it works if you
Yeah,
if you work it,
for sure.
yeah.
Going back to Donald Byrd, I remember you mentioned in a past interview that he used to have midnight office hours.
Yeah, very late.
That is wild for a
Very late. He wouldn't
professor,
show up
like,
on campus till like 10 o'clock sometimes, and it
that
was because he wasn't really a
Yeah,
professor. He was an artist in residence, but he didn't really have a
gotcha.
job, So it was like he
So he's
just
on the
happened to be.
musician, time crunch, like,
Yeah, he was just an artist in residence. I'm sure
yeah,
it was like a level of notoriety for the school to have him there because he had done a lot in jazz academia and at HBCUs and stuff. And yeah, so to have him be associated with the school was a lot. So he kind of made his own thing. He performed a couple concerts a semester, but he'd be like, hey, he would hit. There was a trumpet player, a sax player. There were like seven of us that were really serious. And he'd be like, hey, I'm going to be in my office at 10. You got, come. And we would go there and you know, yeah, sometimes I wouldn't. I'd be in the practice room. I'd be like, "Oh, okay," because he'd be telling stories and like, But then there was sometimes like he would play us cassette recordings he had made of like John Coltrane, like at a place,
wow.
like just having his cassette recorder, like a bootleg he recorded himself, like all kinds of stuff like that.
Oh, so not like John Coltrane's recordings, he would, like,
Oh,
have his recorder there
like
as they were
you
just
could hear him
practicing or something
talking
like
to
that.
somebody at the club while Coltrane's playing in the back. You're like,
Wow.
it was crazy. Like, he was just like, but just for Donald Byrd, man, he was just really like a genius on many levels. He has an amazing art collection that is still in his estate, and his wife still has, and just a brilliant mind. He studied composition with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and he got a pilot's license early, and like he was just
Oh,
like just
damn.
one of those dudes. It was just like an amazing person just to be around. I pray that some of that got in culturally, like issues of equality and all kind. Like he was very involved in a lot of things and knew a lot of like very very like earned PhD and like he was a genius level
Yeah.
dude. So to like I said, I wish I realized the magnitude and understood what that meant when I was younger, but I didn't. But just, I prayed that a lot of it got in, like,
Yeah.
but it was just like now I think so many times after he's passed, after I left Dell State, even before he passed, like, man, I wish I could ask him about this. I wish I could, I would talk
Mm,
to him about this. I wonder what this was like, like just
yeah.
a lot of things like that. But he's just he was a brilliant man and an amazing, human being. So, yeah.
S Yeah. So once you made it to New York City,
Mhm.
you're at the new
Yeah.
school, this is around '97.
Yeah.
What is it like being immersed in the New York City music scene? Because
It's
it has the
intense.
reputation as one of the most cutthroat
Yeah.
scenes in the world.
Luckily for me, so I got there, when I got to the new school, there was like a bunch of people that came in with me, like Robert Glasper, same year, singer Bilal Oliver, a guitar player named Mike Moreno,
Mm,
EJ and Marcus Strickland, a drummer and sax player. And it was just like, and then at the new school, there were people ahead of us that were, it was a very fertile environment there at the time. So, it's definitely cutthroat. I would try and play at a lot of jam sessions and go do all the different things, but it was like we kinda were insulated in a way too. We had our own scene, we would get gigs at these little clubs that sometimes for tips, sometimes for hardly any money, play a jam session. We were all, "Hey, where are you going tonight?" But in the school, we were playing in all these ensembles and stuff all the time. Like, "Hey, oh, is there a room open? Let's get a bass player. Let's go. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
cool. You want to go play?" And we would just like every day was like that at school. And then I would go see Jeff Tane Watts play on Monday nights at the Zinc Bar, or go see Brian Blade at Small, all these legends that I
Yeah.
listened to. So it was like I think the insulation of for us and being in school was very helpful because it was like we were able to play with high level musicians without having to kind of float around,
Mm.
in order to do that, and that was what
Yeah.
the new school afforded me. Like I was like every ensemble I was in was like, Robert and I, like, just recently, I have a car that still has a cassette player in it. We had a recording of, like, his senior project, and he did, like, a
Wow.
Wayne Shorter thing and we played it, and I was just like we were both like, "Man, this could be an album now." You know what I mean? Like, you hear
Yeah.
the youth in us, but there was like, wow, this is what we were playing in college, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many things like that where we listen back, it's like, man, this was at a pretty high level. So I think that that high level within the school kinda that was the thing that helped me get from, the level I was at when I came from Del State to working, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Working in the jazz scene. And then of course I would go do the jam sessions and meet people and play on the gigs and try, hook up with different musicians outside of school and on the scene. But we were playing at such a high level in school that, I think it kinda helped us because we had that every day, you
Mm.
know?
Is there an early gig from around that time that
Mm,
was super formative for you?
wow.
Like something that changed the
There were
way
so
that you
many. I
approach
remember
playing?
so many. There was a place called Cleopatra's Needle where everybody used to play, paid no money, and it wasn't a great gig, I don't even know if it still exists, it might, but, everybody would play there. So there was a gig there. I remember Marcus Strickland had a gig, and he,
Mm.
his twin brother plays drums, so when he called me for a gig, and EJ's amazing. Um, so when he called me for the gig, I was like, "Yes," and I have that gig on mini disc. I told him this. I still have it on my little mini disc recorder. There's this little place called the C Note, Hole in the Wall, but they would give everybody a gig, so you could, so I had one of my first, gig as a leader there, and I have a
Wow.
picture from that gig I posted. Bilal was on it, Robert was on the gig, my friend John Ellis was on the gig. Like, that was my first time leading a band in New York, was at that little grungy place called the C Note, but it was like a place where everybody played.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a few gigs like that that I remember distinctly.
Yeah, I like leading a band for the first time in front of a live audience that is a city audience has to be so nerve-wracking
Yeah,
because
it's funny because that
it's not like
place
a
was like
concert at
it,
school.
yeah,
Like,
but it was kinda almost like that because it was a school hang, you know what I
okay,
mean?
gotcha,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
like a school hang, but there were other people that from, they would just buy tickets and come, but it was just like there were a lot of school people there because that was one of our hangs because everybody knew you could get a gig there, So it's like, "Oh, I'm playing at the Cito," and then people would come. Um Yeah, so, but that was the first one and the last one in a long time. Like after that, it was like almost all sideman stuff,
Yeah.
for a very long time. Unless like, my church would ask me, "Hey, we want to do a jazz thing," and then, I would bring my friends from school to come do that, or, but like under my name at a club in New York, that was probably the first and last time I did that for quite some time.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you're in those smaller, more intimate club settings, is heckling a thing? Like, because I know in stand up, like, there's a lot of heckling in the smaller clubs. Like, do people ever like say shit or throw
Not
shit or
really.
like?
No, not not I've never really experienced that much, in general. Like where, I've seen it happen where people will say something during the show, but like it's not really a thing that
Yeah.
happens. You know what I mean? In jazz, it doesn't really happen.
Mm.
I think
That's
even in
good, I
stand up
guess, and good for the
they're
audience
trying to
because you're the
cut
one
it
you're
out.
the one
Yeah.
holding sticks, so
Right. Right. I'm
they're
not a
already at a
small dude
disadvantage.
either, so I don't,
Yeah, there you go. A chicken wing doesn't hurt nearly as much as a
Right,
drumstick, so
right.
they're already at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking about things I could ask you with
Mm.
music education
Mhm.
because I don't have any formal experience being in a performing arts course or a music education focused school,
Right.
the only thing that came to my mind was the film Whiplash.
Of course.
And I know you probably had, 1,000 questions
Oh my
asked
gosh.
about the Whiplash film at this point, but I gotta ask you, like, as a professional jazz drummer, what was your first reaction when you saw that film? Because I'm assuming it eventually made its way into your
So
zeitgeist.
crazily enough, they invited me to a screening, a early screening of Whiplash. Like I went to, and this was around the same time my first record came out. It was like 24, somewhere in there. So as they were getting up for the run, the gearing up for the runs, they sent me to a screening. They're like, "Man, we want to go, send you to a screening." I think it was an interview I was doing. They were like, "We want to send you to a screening, talk about it, whatever, whatever." I went to the film, and I could not stand it. I was so bothered by this film because I was like,
Mm,
"What is this? It's so unrealistic." Uh, you know, but it's so funny. So I don't know if you know Robert Glasper did the score for the Miles Davis movie called Miles Ahead, where Don Cheadle
yeah.
plays Miles, and I played on kind of a small piece of the score, but
Oh, wow.
in doing that, like we would have these rehearsals and hangs with Don Cheadle. He was so cool. He would take us out to dinner after rehearsal. I would drop him off at his hotel, like the whole thing. Like we became really cool during this time. But we were talking about this movie at one point, and Don is a serious musician. Like Don can really play and sing. Like he's a like people. He was in all state bands growing up. Like Don Cheadle is an amazing musician, let
Mm,
alone the actor he is. Um, but we were talking about this movie, and he was just like, he said he was like, "Man, I loved it," and I was like, "Man, I couldn't stand." We were all the musicians like we hated it. Like he was like, "Yeah, because that's because you're looking at it through musicians' eyes, because it's your world." You know what I mean? But he's like, as a movie, like it's so great, the conflict and blah blah blah. And I was like, okay, from that. Like the performing parts and the practicing parts and all of those things are so unrealistic. Like it's hard,
mm,
but I feel like it's like a doctor like Anthony Volpe's dad is a doctor. Both his parents are doctors. And, it's like him watching Grey's Anatomy. And there's so many
yeah.
things that are not accurate and wrong. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to watch. And that was what Whiplash was for me. Like I've never, I couldn't imagine myself, and maybe it's the person I am, to be in a school where a professor treated people that way. And like, you know what I mean? Or just, you know, of course, I've been playing till, like, you get blisters or stuff, but the blood or it was like everything to the extreme times a million. So, at the
Yeah.
time, I didn't like it, and it's so funny because I have video of this when my kids were little. They were younger, we watched the film, and, my younger boy is cracking up, like, he's looking at it like it's a comedy, like, he's dying
Yeah.
laughing, like, he's
Yeah.
like, "What?" Like, because he knows it's like, "That's not how it works,"
Yeah.
but,
Do you remember are there any scenes specifically that stand out where it just made you go, like, "No way," like, there's
there's
no
so many
chance
things
that
because, like, so this is just a thing. So, we count ours like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then
mhm.
he was like constantly saying 5, 6, 7, 8, which is like a dance count off or something like that. It's
Mm.
not a thing we do in music. Say 5, 6, 7, 8, and then start.
Yeah.
So and that happened every time. It'd be like nails on the chalkboard. But there's so many scenes, like the one where like he throws the cymbal. Like there's these things that have happened or you hear about in jazz because like apparently Papa Jones threw a cymbal at Charlie Parker when he first started playing bebop and jam.
Mm.
Like there's these myths and legends that nobody knows if it really happened, but you know, so they took a lot of that stuff from the story of jazz. And then for me it's just hard when I watch things and like, you know, the music doesn't line up with what's really happening musically, like what they're playing in the film. Like I can't stand it. Like it happens in Mo Better
Mm.
Blues and like, there's some movies where they like really focus on it and it's really accurate, but then there's a lot where it's just like, we don't care, we're just gonna splice this in and do whatever. And then none of it lines up with what you're actually hearing. And then
Mm.
that bothers
So,
me.
like, the actions on the screen a lot of time to you just didn't like, the sound that was actually coming out of the drum set wasn't matching
Oh, like never.
the movements on
Oh,
the
it's
screen.
so bad. Like it's really like none of it lines up. You know what I mean? Like even the
Mm.
band, like I'm sax players in the sections they're playing. like he'll do a crash and there's no cymbal crash. I'm like, what is happening? So
Yeah.
a lot of stuff like that is in the film. Whatever, people love
Y
the film. Like
you would think they would hire someone like yourself or another drumming
it's
professional
not hard to do.
just to run it through and
It's
be like,
not hard to
"Yeah,
do.
like, this does not match." Like, even just for, like, synchronization
Right.
purposes, just
Like
be like, "Yeah."
exactly. So like for like it happens in musicals all the time. People are singing with I played on this scene with Jose my friend Jose James in like one of the Shades of Grey movies. And but like we learned what was happening at the time. Like it was like a song that he recorded and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to pantomime." I didn't do the recording, but I'm going to learn what's there so it kind of looks like I'm playing,
Mm,
what's going on with the playback. But some movies don't focus on it. Whiplash definitely did not focus on the
yeah,
synchronization of playback and visuals.
yeah.
So,
The dark side of music education depicted by Whiplash, the
yeah.
insane practice hours, physical, emotional abuse. Is any of that recognizable to your experience or
I've never experienced that, and I don't know if it's a classical world thing, you know what I mean? But in
Yeah.
jazz, which it probably could be, and in jazz, I had some tough instructors, some that I didn't like at all, but not like on a broad scale, you know what I mean? Especially playing this music, it was just like, hey, I'm trying to convey this. You have people that have their personality things or things that I think they're dealing with internally about where they've gotten in life and all of those things, but I've
Mm,
never seen it just like you know, purposely and incessantly abusive and, emotional. I just I couldn't see myself at even at his age staying in a setting like that. Like no matter
yeah,
what I was trying to get to, like I was never that person to take that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So yeah.
So you didn't have to deal with any of the Fletcher type figures in
Nah,
your education?
not really. We had some
Yeah,
hard instructors, but nothing not even close to
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I just feel like, just,
And I
you know.
don't get me wrong, I've had some demanding instructors, like,
Oh,
playing
yeah, yeah.
ensembles that would stop and like, "Well, why would you do that there? What were you thinking?" Like, I remember one time in the Buster Williams ensemble, like, I played something on the ballad, and he was just stop he's like, "Stop, stop." He's like, "What? Why would you do" just put me on the spot, like, "Why would you play that right there?" And I was just like, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, if you don't know, don't play." Like, it was like one of those things. I had tough,
Mm,
but those things kick your butt and keep you moving, and that's different than, like, emotional
yeah,
abuse. Like, the movie was so extreme.
yeah. So, because it is so extreme, I thought it could be fun to react to one of the scenes from
Let's
Whiplash.
do it.
I pulled it up in the side media tab, so hopefully
It worked.
this will work. See, you know how remote podcasting is, everything always
Right.
works seamlessly.
Right.
So I thought it would be fun to play the not my tempo
Not My
scene. Like, are you
Tempo is
rushing
a
or am I rushing
classic. Yeah,
rushing or
Not My
dragging?
Tempo.
And whenever you see something where you're like, "Oh, yeah, that might happen," or "This is never gonna happen," or like, "This is just fucking absurd," like, you can say whatever you want, and I'll stop it on my end.
Okay.
All right, gang, Whiplash. Little under tempo, okay? Neiman, just do your best. There we go. 5, 6, and.
I'm sorry, that count off just right away. The 5, 6, and is funny.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm not mistaken, this song might be a 7. So it's 5, 6, 7, whatever. I don't know, whatever he's trying to do, but 5, 6, and is pretty funny. But go
Mm.
ahead. It is a 7.
What's
It
up?
is in 7. Yeah, I was right.
It
It
is
is
a
in
7,
7.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's hear some fills. Got Buddy Rich here. Little trouble there. Let's pick it up at 17. Ready? 5, 6, and. Not quite my tempo. Here we go. 5, 6, and. Downbeat on 18. Okay, here we go. 5, 6, and. Bar 17, the and of 4. Got it?
Up to this point, would you say that the drumming matches, or is it
No.
like
I
totally
didn't
off?
even want to stop. Like it's
Yeah.
close. There's some moments that are close, but it's not
Yeah,
even
it's just
close.
it's
Yeah,
just all
like
over
it's
the
just
place.
off. It's
Yeah.
all over the place. Yeah.
5, 6, 7. Not quite my tempo. It's all good. No worries. Here we go. 5, 6, 7. You're rushing. Here we go. Ready? Okay. 5, 6, and. Dragging just a hair. Wait for my cue. 5, 6, 7. Rushing.
Like that was actually on when he played in these two moments here. Like it was
Yeah.
because it's just simple stuff that he's playing.
Yeah, and I was gonna
But when
say
he was like, "How about some fills?" earlier, like, and it is like, okay, that doesn't match at all. That's not what's happening here on screen.
yeah, and I was gonna say, like, I have no idea what it feels like to be in the drum seat, but
Right.
I feel so much anxiety right now.
Yeah,
Like,
this is why it's a good film in that way, I
Yeah.
guess, because this is like, first of all, like if you're in a school like this, I don't know what kind of professor is gonna waste this much time focusing on the drummer. Like it's like, okay, get this together. We'll work on it by ourselves. Like I'm not gonna waste everybody else's time. But like, yeah, it could. This definitely makes now that I'm seeing this, I haven't seen it in a while. I'm like, okay, I see why people think it's a good film because of
Just
the,
like the little details where he jumps the gun and starts
that
playing,
was that was
and
pretty great filmmaking actually.
Yeah.
Like where he like, I was like, oh, that's really
I'm like, yeah, did Miles Teller do that on
Right.
accident and they just kept it in the
That was
film?
pretty
Like that's
good, actually. Yeah, I never really paid attention to it till just now. I was like, oh, that was, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, he's so nervous.
Yeah.
6, and. Dragging. 5, 6.
It's hilarious looking at the other drummer staring at him. Like,
What's up?
the other drummer staring at him is hilarious. Like,
Yeah. Wait, did you feel like when you had the other drummers in your band, was it as competitive as they make it seem here, where they're just waiting for you to fuck up? Like
I
they're
don't
just like,
know if it's
please
like
screw
that
up.
really. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some things like, where you kind of want to play on this song, or I want to do this or whatever, but I don't know if it's like, you know what I mean? Like I've never experienced. There are very few, and especially drummers, like where, their vibes are not good. You know what I mean? But for the most part, drummers more than any instrument, we get along with each other. There's like a,
Mm,
brother, sister, otherhood is like, you know, that kind of we just gravitate towards each other. We drummers always you never see a million guitar players hanging out or piano. You know what I mean? Like drummers, like
yeah.
it's a bond. Like we'll all get together. Like, hey, we're going to see so and so play. There'll be 5 of us together, or we'll meet and all hang out. Like it's just there's a very unique thing about drummers that doesn't really have this much animus. That
Yeah.
you see it here. And I think it's the nature of it's like a communal instrument. How it started, the
Mm,
foundations of it. So I think there's something there about drummers where it's like a welcoming thing more than and don't get me wrong, you do have you know your people with this vibe, but it's not the standard.
yeah. This
Yeah,
this guy, the other drummer, it seems like he's moving his chair an inch closer
like he
every time
knows
the
he's just
camera cuts
yeah,
away,
like I'm waiting
and
for
it's
him to
just
get up.
yeah, his face is just right here,
Right,
staring through him. He's like, I want you to feel my eyes
right,
staring through your skull.
yeah. This was like his first practice or something too, if I remember correctly. Like this is one of his first times with the group, right?
With the band,
Yeah.
this is practice number
It's
1.
like one of these things where the guy, they feel like they got to break you down, because he kind of
Yeah,
built him up. Like, hey, we got Buddy Rich here, and then, like just
yeah.
yeah, like
One throne chair, one practice is a wild pace
horrible,
to keep up with.
horrible.
Why do you suppose I just hurled a chair at your head, Neiman?
I don't know.
Sure you do.
The tempo?
Were you rushing or were you dragging?
I don't know.
Start counting.
5, 6, 7.
In 4, damn it! Look at me!
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
Now, was I rushing or was I dragging?
At least he's counting in 4 instead of 5, 6, 7,
The
8.
wildest thing I've ever seen in front of a whole band. Like, could you
Oh my
imagine this today?
God.
Like, this dude would be on the news. Like, it's the wildest thing I've ever seen.
No, that is wild.
Count again.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Rushing or dragging?
Rushing.
So you do know the difference. If you deliberately sabotage my band, I will fuck you like a pig. Now, are you a rusher or are you a dragger? Or are you gonna be on my fucking time?
I'm gonna be on your time.
What does that say?
Quarter note equals 215.
Count me at 2:15.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Jesus fucking Christ! I didn't know they allowed retards into Schaefer. Am I to understand that you cannot read tempo? Can you even fucking read music? What is that?
8th note.
Yes, what is that?
Dotted 16th note.
Sight read measure 101.
Ba 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 ba.
What are you, in a fucking a cappella group? Play the goddamn kit! Now answer my question.
This is a comedy, bro. This is a comedy. Like, it has to, like, it's
Yeah.
really tragic. Like a tragic comedy. Like, it's really, this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
If someone, like, as a drummer, if someone gives you the tempo and they say 8th notes at 240, could you bang that out like on the spot and
No.
get pretty close? Or
Honestly, no, I could not. Like, I could get pretty close, you know, but I have a metronome app on my phone. There's no reason for it. Like, if he wanted his tempo, then put a click track on and let them
That's
play, let them play with the tempo. You know, like, how do you know your tempo's right? You're clapping at 215. Like,
exactly, that's what I was thinking. I was
It's-
like, what is he testing it
it's
against?
very tricky to like be exactly on tempos. I'll get really close, and sometimes I'll be right on it. But you know, from experience and practicing, like, okay, but I don't need, like, no, I won't need to. I know about where that is, and then I'll pull up a metronome. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm close. It's just a couple BPM off, you know. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, I wouldn't 215. I'd be like, I can get you close, but I wouldn't be like right on it. No, yeah.
Question, were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
Rushing.
Oh my dear God. Are you one of those single tier people? Do I look like a double fucking rainbow to you? You must be upset. Are you upset?
No,
No, so you just don't give a shit about any of this?
I do give a
So
shit about this.
are you upset? Yes or fucking no? Yes, you are upset.
Yeah.
Say it.
I'm upset.
Say it so the whole band can hear you.
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
Louder!
I'm upset.
You are a worthless, friendless, faggot-lipped little piece of shit whose mommy left daddy when she figured out he wasn't Eugene O'Neill, and who is now weeping and slobbering all over my drum set like a fucking 9-year-old girl. So for the final father-fucking time, say it louder!
I'm upset.
Carl, start practicing harder, Neiman. Whiplash, bar 125.
Oh my
Big
God.
boy tempo.
Like
This is an amazing performance by him, though, because he won an
Yeah.
Oscar for this, didn't he?
I don't
The band
know.
director, like, I forgot his name, the actor, he won an Oscar for this, which
Let
is
me-
crazy to me, but yeah, I think he won an Academy Award for this performance.
Yeah, best sound mixing, best supporting actor,
Best
best film
supporting
editing.
actor, yeah, it's a crazy performance. But no, I don't know, man. I'm from the hood. Like, you're not gonna talk to me like that, and I don't care. Like, it something would have, you know, that first slap, we would have been on the ground. Like, I don't care how, you know what I mean? I don't care
Yeah.
who you are. You wouldn't have put your hands on me like that. It's not a thing. I don't care. I don't want it that bad. You know what I mean? And if I do,
Yeah.
I'll get it another way. But
That
like,
should be the sequel, is Whiplash from the Hood, just to see how just to
oh
see how
my
it
gosh,
goes.
the movie would be over so fast. Like,
Whiplash, the redemption arc.
oh my goodness. Like,
Yeah, it's a 5 minutes, and then he just gets jumped and
yeah,
never
like
teaches
nobody
again.
would, like nobody in the band would have tolerated that. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, whoa, what are you doing, bro? You know?
Yeah. But it does.
And then
I
that
think
movie goes on, like, it gets so crazy because then he gets in that car accident and still goes to the concert, like, he just it's just like it's like the and I guess, I get it. They're trying to show that there's, like, just a crazy level of passion and determination needed to I don't disagree, but
yeah, it
yeah.
it is. I think just as a thought piece too,
Mhm.
the film does a great job at posing the question of how high a pressure of a teaching environment do you need to create greatness
Right.
or
Right.
foster excellence? Does it need to be to the point of breaking a musician like you break a horse? Does
Or
it
can it go the other way, like
or can it go the other
parenting,
way?
like
Yeah.
gentle parenting now, and like the thing, like I grew up and with
Yeah.
switches and belts, and now it's like you talk to your kids a different way, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
which way does it need to go? But I don't
Yeah.
know. This
Where
it's
do you
like the
s
thing with Bobby Knight and all these coaches that you know what I mean? They're like it
Yeah.
just the tapes come out and everybody's like, oh my God, this is but
Yeah.
they had a
'Cau
level of success, but is that level of success worth what it does to other people? You know what I mean? And that's the thing that
Yeah,
is
and then the other question is, does Miles Teller's character, does he succeed because of Fletcher's intensity and abuse,
right.
or does he succeed despite it?
Despite it.
And he would have reached that level of greatness regardless, and maybe Fletcher even hindered him from
Maybe
getting there. Maybe he
faster.
would
Yeah, maybe he
yeah,
would
maybe
have
he would have
reached it
gotten
faster if he
there
was in a
sooner.
more is it I I'm a fan of love and loving environments, so it's
Yeah,
just like I can't see how that, you know and I mean I don't know. There's been tough things. I've definitely, had tough instructors and know people that have had tough instructors that were taskmasters. And my mother, told me that she would get hit on the ruler on her hand in piano
mm,
lessons and things like that. You know what I mean? And I guess that builds a certain thing, but it's just like, is there another way to get to that without having the abusive thing, that comes with it sometimes. So yeah, this movie is really crazy to me. Like just and I hadn't seen it in a while and seeing that scene is just like is so outlandish.
yeah,
But, I see why people love it because it's really good filmmaking, like the
mhm,
this and screenplay writing. Like it's like, oh, this tension and the nervousness and the anxiety, like you feel that
yeah.
watching it. So yeah, I get it. I get it as a film.
But I also understand why it could prevent you from enjoying it at the highest
Yeah.
level if you are a professional drummer and a distinguished drummer, because it would be like a Major League Baseball player watching a film where the guy, maybe he's a good actor, but when he goes to throw a baseball, it looks like a noodle,
Oh,
and
it's like crazy.
and
Yeah.
the gun says 97, but he knows it was like a 43-mile-an-hour pitch,
Right.
and you're like, it takes you out of
And
it,
so you can't
yeah,
relax and just separate.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
hard for me to separate that. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like I like Mo Better Blues. That's one of my a good movie I like, and some of the playing is off, but I know Denzel spent a lot of time trying to figure it out, and then I know like Jeff Tain Watts is one of my heroes. Is like, and the music in the film is so good. Like I'm not even whatever. No offense to whoever did it. I'm just not a fan of the music in Whiplash either. So
yeah,
on just so many levels, it's just not my
yeah.
vibe. You know.
A and obviously, Whiplash is the abusiveness of Whiplash, especially in your experience, that just didn't happen. That was
I
like the
never
physical
seen that.
abuse,
Yeah,
that
never
wasn't.
fit. No, I don't
Yeah,
know. I didn't grow up taking classical lessons
yeah,
in Germany or in Austria. Like just
yeah,
some of these places where it might be the case. Art conservatory, like I don't know what the classical word. I've never seen that in jazz. You'll get some harsh talking tos,
yeah.
like with just like, but nothing near that.
When you filter out the most extreme behavior that's probably unrealistic, what would you say are your biggest beefs with music education now looking back on it? Like, are there things that you would change
Um.
about it?
So, excuse me. There's a lot of music education is tricky because especially if you're trying to be a performing touring musician, a lot of times you're taught by people that don't have a lot of practical and real world experience doing that. If you're fortunate, you know, uh, like there were icons when I at the news like Reggie Workman and Buster Williams and Andrew Cyril and um you know, John Riley, people that like I would go see play, you know what I
Mm,
mean? But then there was also a lot of people that just had the academic side of it, which you need, there's a formula for teaching and learning that academia provides, there's use for. But a lot of it is like I would change that part as much as I could, you know what I mean? Like to where because the way that it's sometimes those things are taught from people in those positions are not really ways or things that you can use in the real world. You know what
yeah.
I mean? It's like you're teaching by rote just to teach and to learn those things. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, is this really like we talked about earlier, is this really practical for what I'm going to try and do? You know what I mean? Like I think that sometimes programs have you focus on a lot of things that aren't what you're trying to do, so I
Mm,
would change that as much as possible. But like, there's a standard academia has. You have to have these things to get a degree. You have to have, this amount of credits in this and this amount of credits in that to finish school and have at an accredited institution and have a degree, so it's a tricky balance there with real world applications in academia, especially in jazz where it's just such a improvisational and somewhat free form music,
yeah.
there's a contradiction that's inherently there and when you get into jazz degrees and jazz academia and music education in general,
Yeah.
so I
Absolutely.
don't know if that's changeable, but that's just something that comes along with the territory. It's just like, hey, like oftentimes in a lot of places you're not getting this information from people that have done what you're trying to do. And in my instance in the school, like and with me and like people like Robert Glasper and stuff is and we had started doing it while we were in school. Like people started hiring us our last
Mm,
few, like for going on tours and stuff like that. And then you started seeing like, oh, okay, this is um a little different than what it's really like. What they told me those 2 years, I was like, no, that's not really how it works. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
there's always going to be that inherent like contradictory element in jazz academia, and I
Yeah.
guess it's just music in general if you're trying to be a performing artist because
Yeah.
but I think this is like that in any discipline, anything, you learn science from people that like, might not have been an engineer at a Boeing or whatever, and that's what you're trying to do, but they have to teach you the things that you have to learn in school in order you know, um, to get through and get a degree or whatever
Yeah.
you're trying to go for. So I think that's in anything.
For
So
sure.
yeah.
I wanna get into the thought of you.
Mhm.
I gotta go to the bathroom
Oh,
real quick.
pause.
I'm just
Yes.
gonna go take a quick piss.
Sure.
I'll be right
We'll
back.
edit it out.
So, the thought of you, which is your debut album, dropped back in 2014.
Yeah. Yeah, a little over 10 years
Happy,
ago now.
belated
10.
decade
Yeah. Right. It's
anniversary.
crazy.
That's crazy. So, th the way that you play drums on this, and
Mhm.
and I've been listening to it over the past week, just whenever I get a chance, listening to a song, having it in the background, going on walks, wherever. I don't normally listen to albums like
Mhm.
this, jazz drum albums, where the drummer's the band leader,
Mhm.
and I don't listen to much jazz in general, so I was trying to take a step back and, like, really think about what stood out to me about the album, separating it from genre, and the drum playing is super expressive, like,
Mm.
it's so expressive, and I don't normally listen to music thinking of drums as the center of expression. It's
Mhm.
it's it's more of the rhythm and backing. And so to you, I want to ask, like, how do you get to that level where you're playing the drums with so much feeling and so much expression that's being conveyed beyond just the rhythm?
Well, thank you for the compliment. I think like, I didn't wanna make a drum record, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want a record where it was like, "Hey, drum solo every song, like, it's focused on the drums," but I just wanted to make a record of music that people would wanna listen to, and I think that's just how I approach music in general, and I think that in that I guess the expressiveness that you're talking about I think that's just who I am kinda, you know what I mean? Like, I'm a lovey-feely, emotional kinda dude, you know what I mean? And I think that comes across in my playing on this record, and just in general, but I am, I love songs, so, a lot of my career has been playing with vocalists, so I have, kinda delved in heavily into, like, playing a song. What do these lyrics mean? What is it? How do you convey this emotion on my instrument? How do you have feel a certain
Yeah.
way? Like, can it be aggressive here? Can it be delicate here? Can it, so I've kind of delved into that over my career and in my learning process. So I think that's where that comes from. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of like I this is something that playing in New York at jam sessions and stuff. Like I always try when sometimes you can play at a jam session, there'll be like 5, 7 soloists on the song. And it's like, okay,
Mm.
how do I make each one of these have their own thing? How do I give this a different vibe? Okay, there's another trumpet player coming. How can we start his solo differently than so it's not just this one monotonous thing, you know what I mean? Like trying to create shapes and feelings and sounds. So I think part of that has been that training in New York. For me, and I know some drummers is not a thing they work on and just plow through it, which sometimes serves its purpose too. But
Yeah.
I think for me, it was just like I've always been into like, okay, what feeling or message can this convey, and then how do I support conveying that from the drum set?
Yeah.
How do I craft a like on You're Still the One, the cover we did with Gretchen, like there's
Mm.
like a lot of symbols and airy feeling things like that I wanted to convey on that versus like, on one of those interludes with like the heavy drums and like you know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
more aggressive things. So it's just like trying to I think being in touch with feelings first and then trying to get that across. And that's the thing that
Mm.
some of my favorite drummers that I've listened to all my life have had, like Elvin Jones. One of my favorite John Coltrane records is just John Coltrane's ballads, and it's a ballads record. And Elvin Jones shapes all of these melodies that were like just stock tunes at the time, and they just played these ballad versions of them, and it's like one of the most beautiful albums, and yeah, when I listen to Brian Blade or Bill Stewart or, Eric Harlan or some other contemporary drummer friends of mine, they're masters at doing that, so I've always wanted to like and then also I've never been scared, like I've always felt free in music to be myself. And I think that's kind of who I am too. Like, like the things I talked about, like, I might tear up at a rom-com. I might be, like it's just like the kind of person I am.
Yeah.
So I just try and just be myself in music. And I think that was kind of what I was trying to I know that's what I was trying to do on the album. Just tell my story in,
Yeah.
as much as different in as many different ways as I could. And then like when I practice, I try and figure that out. Like, oh, this sound like I can convey this story this way or this emotion this way or so yeah, I focus on that a lot on the drum, so thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And when you when you're playing, whether it was practicing leading up to the recording or the recording itself,
Mhm.
are you able to get into the flow state that the music suggests? Because as a listener, like it just seems like it ebbs and flows
Mhm.
so seamlessly, and I wonder about the state of mind of yourself while you're playing it. Do you also feel like that, or are you like too, yeah, like you're checking in on how the overall piece is going, and maybe you can't really sit in that pocket
I
of
think
flow
I was
state?
able to tap into it thanks to my producer, Derek Hodge, amazing bass
Mm.
player, composer, arranger, and orchestrator, and does movie scores and works with the LA Phil now and does all of these things. Like I kind of had full and complete trust in him. You know what I mean? So it was just like um, I could just let go and and then once we finished the takes, he was like, "Hey, what if we try this?" Whatever. Like, and then but I was able to remove myself from like them making the record process for a minute. As much as I could, I still, of course, thought about it. We have another record in the can that he worked with me on.
Mm.
That we're trying to get released soon. But similar vibe, like, and also like the supporting the people you have around you, like Robert, and I had such long relationships with everybody on that record, maybe except for Nikki Ross, the one singer who sings the gospel stuff.
Yeah.
But everybody else, Ben Williams, Robert Glasper, Shedrick Mitchell, Keon, John Ellis, Bilal, Gretchen, like everybody I had worked with my whole career, from college on up. So like I didn't have to think about anything. I knew who they were. These are close friends, so I know what they bring, what they're going to say, I played with them in so many other settings other than
Mm,
mine. It was just like a symbiotic thing that happened.
yeah.
Um,
Was there
so
anything sorry to cut you
no, no,
off.
go
I
ahead.
I was I was gonna say, was there anything surprising about the way your bandmates interpreted what you wrote?
Um, Not
Like s
really. Like it became like I mean nothing surprised, but they added so much. Like I couldn't imagine like they took what I had and just turned it into these amazing things that
mm,
like far surpassed my expectations. You know what I mean? It's
mm,
just like what everybody brought. Like I was just like, wow, is that the same song that I wrote or whatever? Like it's like
yeah,
they totally uh and that was one of the reasons I tried to get who I got. But like they
yeah,
totally turned it into something that I couldn't imagine it being.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna go back to baseball.
Yeah.
Maybe this will be the last time
No, it
before,
doesn't matter to
we're
me.
recording. I I just don't wanna minimize the music aspect of it, but so much of what you've been saying makes me think about things from my own athletic
Mm,
process, and so if you consider going up to the cages and working out after practice, if that's like the creative process of designing pitches, there would be times where me and other guys on the team, we would smoke weed and then go up to the cages and then like work on shit.
right.
And some things would click. Sometimes it made things way worse. And I'm like, that just like as soon as you're not high anymore, you're like, that was the dumbest shit. I'm
Right.
like, I think I just invented a curveball and then you try it when you're sober and you're like, yeah, no, that's just a
What was
spinning
that? Yeah.
fastball. Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you ever smoke and practice things on the drums or shrooms, like anything? Like, is there anything, any substance that gets you out of your own head where you're like, this is something that helps me creatively?
Yeah, I've never done any type of drug, which is crazy. Like not
Really?
one, not weed, not one type of drug. I drank like in college
Mm,
for a little bit, like, and I just never liked the taste of alcohol, so that went by the wayside. But I've never smoked a joint, like, never done any of it, which is crazy because I went to a HBCU and like you could walk in the wing of my dorm and it smelled like a weed factory in the night. Like it was
oh
great. I
yeah,
probably had contact highs from being around it,
yeah,
but I've never done any of it, but, I had kids early too, so maybe that kinda, like that experimentation phase was, like, done for me, but I was always like, I don't know, I've never tried. I have friends that are like, "Hey, man, you should try it," and I'm just like, "You know what? I'm kinda past it now, like, I'm good." Like, it didn't happen this far, I'm okay. Um, but yeah, I have friends that have that, especially musically, they're like, "Man, like, it helps them get to what I just it's never been a thing for me." Like, I've never done any type of drug, like, for better or worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I was gonna try it, like if I was gonna try weed for the first time as an adult, now I'd probably just do a corner of an edible and
There's
saw
so
what
many other
happened.
things that yeah, like,
Yeah, you
you
wouldn't
could
even have
try
to
now.
smoke at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like I've just never it's never been a thing, and I think it because I had, like, I was my sophomore year in college, I had my first daughter, you know what I mean? So, it was like
Mm,
I kinda had to get on a path somewhat quickly, you know what I
yeah,
mean? So, I kinda didn't, you know,
yeah,
never incorporated any of that. So
yeah. It's just interesting because the drums, especially, it as an instrument, it has such strong ties to ceremonies
oh,
and
like,
especially like
tribal
psychedelic experience.
rituals and yeah, everything.
Yeah, like, they even have, I forget what it's called, some type of breathing where you're doing it to the beat of the drums, and that's
Mm,
supposed to make you feel out of body. So
right.
there's a name for it, but, like, there's so many tribal influences where drugs come into it, and the drums are such a huge part of, like,
Yeah.
the grounding of that experience and keeping the beat.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, it's never been a
Probably for the better.
thing. I guess, yeah, it worked out. I mean,
I
it's
don't
just
think I'm trying to think back, like, if there's anything that I took from my baseball experiences being high and playing around with stuff that actually added something to
that
my
that was
repertoire.
beneficial. Right, right,
I
right.
think it was more
I
just
mean,
like
music might be different, who knows? There
yeah.
might be, some people might get the benefit. It was just never a thing for me.
I think it was more just like, I can't believe how much of my body I can feel right now, like,
Got you.
things that you
Right,
normally don't
right,
tap into,
right.
and it just like, almost like picking up a glass of water when you're sober, you're not really thinking about it, and then when you're high, you can be like, "Oh, I feel like the skin that's in contact with
With the yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, you're
glass and,
more so
like,
yeah.
the baseball," and, like, thinking about, like,
Right,
everything that's, like,
right.
connecting through your core. I don't know if that
There's a
actually
lot of
helped or
studies
not.
now about psychedelic stuff too, and like brain function and all of those things, like and healing and brain injuries and that we we lost a generation of science on it because it was tabooed and you know what I mean, like and like there's I know people that have gotten off of like heavy addictions doing ayahuasca and all kinds of things, you know what I mean? So yeah, I just never ventured down that road, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about hip hop
Mhm.
as we start to end off because I know you've said you were a pretty big hip hop head back in the 80s and
I
90s.
was in a golden era, I think. Like, yeah.
Yeah. So the guy I'm gonna ask you about is not part of that era, but it's arguably he was very much influenced by it,
Mhm.
which is Kendrick Lamar.
Mhm.
And you mentioned Robert Glasper, who played on to Pimp a Butterfly,
Yeah.
like him, Kamasi
Paris
Washington,
Martin.
Paris Martin.
Yeah.
Uh, Safe to say that jazz obviously has a huge influence on the way that Kendrick approaches music, or
Yeah.
at least did it for that album,
Yeah.
because he's kept a lot of the jazz influences even past to Pimp a Butterfly. As a distinguished jazz drummer and producer, band leader, what stands out to you when you listen to Kendrick Lamar's music? Like, do you get like the subtle jazz influences? Do you when it hits you, like, does anything pop into your head? Like, oh, I see like where he's taking this from, or that, like
Mhm.
anything like that when you hear his music?
It's funny. So I just played at the Library of Congress, like last week, just a few days ago. And then part of that performance with the singer Somi that I performed with, they pulled things from the archives, and then we got to see like some, whatever things from Uganda, Rwanda, letter Hazel Scott stuff, Nina Simone papers. They had an exhibit in a case where like Maya Angelou had written a letter to Max Roach and Abby Lincoln about how Malcolm X's killing affected
Mm,
her. Like it was just amazing stuff. And I think that, you know, culturally for me, like especially like black culture in that period where it was like so many different things, everybody was connected and they all shared these things. I feel like I get that with Kendrick. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's not just jazz influence. I feel like he raps like a jazz artist. You know what I mean?
mm,
Like it's just like somebody like Maya Angelou, like it just the way they use language and form sentences and is very similar to how we craft solos and how we craft music, and jazz is this mishmash of all the things, and it's all acceptable to create this medium. That's how it was formed. It's like all these pieces of different music and it came to create this genre. um so in the spirit of that, I feel like Kendrick, not only he has that in a language sense, he has that in how he puts rhymes together, how he puts bars together, as they say, and like how he crafts his rhymes. So it makes complete sense to me that he would be into jazz and other music, music that is played by people and has push and pull and isn't rote and strict.
yeah,
And then to embrace it the way he has, like I think that's he's become one of my favorite rappers from his bootlegs, from his mixtapes back in the day. Like I love like, yo, this dude has something different. And it's like there's a like we improvise with notes and chord structures and things. There's an improvisation that happens with language too.
yeah,
That I am a huge my one of my favorite writers. She's a friend, Imani Perry. Like she's crafted. She like sometimes the way she writes is just so beautiful. And people are like, what do you mean? I'm just like, man, read the sentence. and the structure of it and how the words fit together and all of those things. Like I love that, so I feel that with Kendrick rapping.
Yeah.
That was one of the things I love about Jay-Z too, like how he could tell a story and it's so clever and like, oh, double and triple entendres and that's just like the same way as me listening to a Miles Davis solo. Like how do you get to that over this song we've I've heard him play a million times, All of Me or something, like a
Yeah.
standard song, and he does this thing with it. We know the words, you know what I mean? But how he puts them together, that's the jazz to me, you know what I mean? The jazz, like that's
Yeah.
the improvisatory part. Like it's just like how you craft it. And that's why I love Kendrick because the way he rhymes it's like you go back and the same thing. I'll go back and listen to a Branford Marsalis that I know from 95 or 7 or 8 or whatever. And like every time I listen to it, I hear something different. And that's how I feel about how he was like, oh, snap. I didn't realize he was referencing this
Yeah.
and pulled this in from his other song.
Yeah.
And, so um, I think that's just hip hop in general, though. Like the I didn't realize this growing up because I wasn't really that verse in jazz, but like it is I think like the element of it, just coming up with putting words together on the spot, like real MCs do, and being to improvise that. Like Black Thought is a jazz musician to me. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like it's the same thing. Common, Most Def, like
Yeah.
I've seen them with Robert, and you're like, yo, that's why these two mesh so well because they come from the same place. It's the same root and, it's just a different way of doing it's a different way of using the same science in
Yeah.
my opinion, So, like I love Kendrick and like how he, even when there's not much jazz in the song, like a song like Damn, like on Damn or whatever, like it's there
Mm.
in how he talks and how he puts words and sentences and bars together. So
Yeah.
I just love that connection through, and that's why, like, I had like that 88. 88 was a very big year for me, but it was a big year for hip hop too. EPMD and Big Daddy
Mm.
Kane, and, all of these people
Yeah.
had amazing records out. Rakim,
Mm.
like it was just like, and then when I got in high school, whatever, you had like Tribe and, and they were literally pulling jazz, and so
Yeah.
those sounds get in your head. Like, what is that? How does that sound like that? Oh, that's a Ron Carter sample. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You learn later on, or
Yeah, it's
like,
like bringing you back to where they got their
yeah.
influence from,
Yeah.
listening to the music, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just really a powerful thing. So, I hear jazz and Kendrick when it's not even in the track. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No,
Yeah.
that's a good point. I didn't think about that, the improvisational element
Mhm.
of his actual
Yeah.
voice and his rapping, because
And then he has tone inflection
it's
and
tone
yeah,
inflections, and
like
then sometimes, like,
different
he's on
characters and
beat,
yeah,
and then he's purposely rapping
yep,
off the beat, and,
yep,
like, he's not making a mistake in the
yeah.
recording, like, he's doing it for a reason to go back and forth, but there is an element of, like, it fits, but it also keeps you on your toes, and you're not really sure exactly
Yeah.
what's gonna
And
come
like
next.
sometimes it's just like a poem. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like over some
yeah,
music. Like that's one of the great things about poetry. You think about like somebody like Nikki Giovanni or other poets and writers is like, okay, wow, there's a formula, but you kind of come up with your own way to use the formula and make this original thing,
yeah.
Yeah, so
This is a
I'm a huge fan. I'm trying to see if I'm gonna go see him and SZA on tour or when they come through here in a couple weeks.
oh, you have to.
Yeah, I know. I want to go see it.
You could probably work the music magic and get some
We'll see.
access
I don't know.
passes
That
or
might be a
something.
tricky one for me to get tickets for. I do have success. I've gotten, I usually
There you
don't pay
go.
to go to stuff, but yeah, I'm gonna try and get into that.
There's a Kamasi Washington quote I
Mm.
wanted
Mhm.
to share, and this is from his time from playing sax on To Pimp a
Okay.
Butterfly, and he says, "We've now got a whole generation of jazz musicians who have been brought up with hip hop.
Mm.
We've grown up alongside rappers and DJs. We've heard this music all of our life. We're as fluent in Jay Dilla and Dr. Dre as we are Mingus and Coltrane." So, you being the hip hop head you were in the 80s and 90s, having the distinguished career in jazz, do you feel like that dual influence of jazz and hip hop has shaped your playing, like having those both side by side?
Completely. Yeah, like it's I don't see them as separate now anymore. You know what I mean? Like it was like I know that the generation before us was like, it kind of started changing in the 90s, but that generation before us that was still alive, they frowned on it a lot, but it's like for us growing up, it's the culture. It was black culture. It was just American culture. You couldn't avoid it. So it's like no matter
Mm,
what you were doing, you could be in jazz school, but you're not going to go out and not hear Jay-Z. You're not going to go to a club and not hear Biggie or Tupac or Snoop or whatever. Where are
mm,
you going to hang out? Like if you have a life outside of jazz where you don't hear these things. So for
yeah.
our generation, it was like, yeah, we were studying what we were studying, but it was also like I love this and I'm going to learn how to play this too. I'm not going to not listen to Dilla and I think the thing that people often miss is like hearing that like the deep connections, like they're direct branches from the same tree. You know what I mean? There's no separation between them at all, in my
Mm,
opinion. Same thing for gospel music with me. Like I grew up playing gospel, and that influences how I play jazz a lot too. And that's the thing I love about this music is that it's the place where it's all welcome. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like this is, hey, you can bring all the pieces you've learned, all your life stories, all the music you listen to, all the things you read, bring it in and create something, and that this is where it's acceptable. Like Robert's Black Radio, when he did the first Black Radio, people said all these things about it. And I'm like, this is just a progression of what he's been doing. He did
Mm,
trio records, he did small group records that were straight, more considered like this is jazz too. Like he's bringing this in, and it's a different thing. There's improvisation, there's song form. So why is it not jazz? You know what I mean? Like to the
yeah.
critics when it came out, and it's just like, hey, you got to be true to yourself and bring your influences. But look what it's done. Like he
Yeah.
could have easily been like, hey, I'm just gonna play straight ahead and be a piano player. But look where being himself has got him. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
it's just a different thing where it should be acceptable to bring all of the things that influence you into this music. And jazz is the one place where you can. You can't do
yeah.
that in rock. You can't do that in pop. Like you have to play if I'm a drummer on Lady Gaga's gig, I have to play those parts. If
Mm,
I'm in Beyonce's band, I have to play those parts. I have room, a little room here or there, but it's like you're playing a role. That's the
yeah.
thing I love about this music is that you're playing yourself. You know what I mean? You get
Mm,
to be yourself. I don't have to play a specific pattern on the drums for the whole song and then maybe deviate a little. Like I have friends that play with Usher and like yeah, it's amazing to go see those shows and they have room to have freedom and stuff, but it's just like it's a different thing playing this music. And I think that's
yeah.
why if I wanted to focus on being a gospel R&B, I could go do it. And I think also the skill set you learn playing this music is transferable to all of those different things. You
Mm,
can't bring in you can't be solely an R&B drummer and try and come and like go do a jazz gig. It doesn't work like that.
yeah.
But you can be a jazz drummer and like, hey, I'm gonna get through that Usher gig. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it might not
100%.
sound
Yeah.
like Aaron Spears, my friend Aaron Spears, but it's gonna be good. I'm gonna get through it and play the part. So,
100%.
but the drummers that solely do that can't come into my world and go play at the Village Vanguard and it you know, be
Yeah.
palatable.
Yeah.
No offense to
Jazz is
them.
more like the universal
Yeah,
language.
totally, totally.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like the drum set, my instrument was invented for this. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
this is really Rosetta Stone. This is the key that kind of gets you to all the other things to me, like
yeah.
studying this and then going out and doing other stuff, in my opinion. So, but yeah, for hip hop and Kendrick and what Kamasi said is very accurate. This is a full generation of people, that that grew up with where the culture of music was hip hop. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
worldwide. You know what I'm saying? So it was
100%.
unavoidable. So of course it's going to get into our music.
100%.
Yeah.
I've a couple quick fire
Yeah,
questions for
sure.
you to end off. If someone shadowed you for the 30 minutes before your performance,
Mhm.
what would surprise them most about your routine?
Ooh, it's a good one. Surprise them the most. Guess how relaxed I am. Like I don't really I'm a silly dude, so I'm usually cracking jokes and
Mm,
I'm the dude that gets everybody relaxed or says something silly. So I think that would probably be the most surprising. Like it's not.
I like that, staying loose.
Yeah, I'm always I'm a silly guy. Like I'm a jovial kind of person, so I'm always the one like,
Yeah.
say something silly and then people like. So that might be the shocking. That might shock people.
If aliens landed and you had to explain jazz with one solo or one performance, what would you play?
Of mine or somebody else's?
It could be yours, could be
Ooh,
someone else.
if I had to explain jazz in one like just a performance, not it doesn't have to be a
Yeah,
solo or a performance.
and the aliens would go back to their planet being like, "All right, that's
Man,
jazz."
it's hard. So I give this record as gifts to people that aren't really into jazz. So maybe Kinda Blue. Like I would play something from
Mm,
Kinda Blue. Like my friends that are just like, I want to listen to more jazz. I give them that as an introduction, and then kind of go up and more intense and less from there. But yeah, maybe I would like play like some Miles Davis kind of blue or something like
mm,
that.
that's
Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong mixing aliens and Miles
Right.
Davis.
Totally. 'Cause I'm like, hey,
They definitely be smoking
later on, he
weed.
was getting towards you guys. Like, here you go.
They definitely be smoking weed on the ship
Right.
back to whatever planet they came from. Well, Otis Brown, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people follow you? Where can they keep up with your music? Anything you're putting out on social media? And I'll link it all to the
Okay.
intro and where people are listening and watching this.
Yeah, thank you. It's been an honor being here and a pleasure for me too. All my socials are OB3 is me. OB the number 3, like Otis Brown III is
Mm,
me. So Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of that. That's my username. I have a website, ob3.com, which is the word spelled out. There's not much there, so I'm working on that, trying to, I'm so bad at updating my
mm,
site. And then they can listen to music wherever they listen to music. My record's there. This new one will be out soon, and it'll be in all the
cool.
places too. Um, and yeah, I'll be teaching at Eastman. I'll be still playing on the scene. Like I still tour and perform with a lot of artists. So yeah, but usually on my socials, I post what's going on and stuff like that. So,
100%.
yeah.
Otis Brown, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.